When Clint Kubiak was hired to be our offensive coordinator for the Seattle Seahawks, he came in with a game plan of running the football effectively, and that would open up the passing attack based on the play action. And for most of this year, that hasn't been the case. You've been saved by Sam Darnold. He's been an excellent quarterback for your Seahawks, and the running game has been very up and down and up and down and up and down. Charbonnet has done, well, fine after what was supposed to be a stellar preseason. He's turned more into your power back. Kenneth Walker has clearly showed that he can find big plays when they need to be found, but it does feel to a degree that he is a feast or famine running back. If he has multiple big carries in a game for 10, 15, 20, 30 yards, then he's going to have a high yardage amount in that game. If he doesn't have those big breakaway runs, well, they're just not going to be there. And I do want to make sure that I highlight this because I know a lot of fantasy football owners are upset about it. Zach Charbonnet is clearly going to be your in-zone carry magnet, which is why his yardage is a little bit lower. Let's call a spade a spade. The Seattle Seahawks have been basically average when it comes to the rushing attack. That isn't a bad thing because clearly it's not hurting the offense, but is the running game finally getting fixed? Here on Seahawks Today, we're going to dive through that for the whole episode. I am your host, Will Ortner, and I tweeted this out earlier on talking about the run game for the Seahawks, and I asked the question, did Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet fix the Seahawks running game? Hopefully you went over onto Twitter following me at Will Ortner, and you were able to answer the question in my comments. I would make sure to respond back as best as I possibly could. But if you haven't had the opportunity to, head on over there right now. You can see it at Will Ortner. Easy to find. Follow me. I'm going to keep you up to date with the latest happenings on your Seattle Seahawks. Now, I've been very clear. This rushing attack is middle of the pack. When I looked before Monday Night Football's action tonight, your Seattle Seahawks were basically right in the middle of the pack. You were at 17th in the NFL when it came to rushing yards per game. Is that good? No. Is it bad? No, not necessarily. It just doesn't fit what this offense was supposed to be. You were supposed to be a ground and pound team that opened everything up elsewhere. But I would say that you are starting to show some signs of improvement. And that's not just because you ran for basically 200 yards against the Arizona Cardinals. I'm saying basically because you got 198, and the only reason you got 198 is because Sam Darnold Drew Lock had to take so many knees in this game. It took away from the amount of yardage that you had. But it does feel like more often than not, game after game, we're seeing higher averages for your running backs when it comes to their runs per or yards per run, but also you're seeing more and higher numbers when it comes into the pure rushing numbers. Zach Charbonnet had his best game of the season against the Arizona Cardinals. Kenneth Walker, while it might not have been his best game, it was a pretty darn good game for him as well. I think that there are signs. I think that this team is fixing their rushing attack. What do you think? Will the run game continue to improve this year, or is this just kind of a blip on the radar because the Seahawks played two really bad defenses back-to-back weeks? Let me know down below in the comments. So I've already kind of gotten into this, talking about the Seahawks basically being in the middle of the pack. You're right at that 17 mark when it comes to your rushing attack. That's not just your rushing yards. That's your rushing average. You're right around that 114 yards per game on the rushing attack. Not bad. In fact, it's actually steadily improved as the year has gone on. Now, some of that is because against the 49ers, you just really laid an absolute egg offensively. But some of that is because you've seen the return of Robbie Oots. It's because you've seen this offensive line unit continue to gel, and we're going to dive into more of that in just a moment. But I do want to point out this stat here that I found fascinating while I was doing my research. Your Seattle Seahawks in the last 3 games, so against the Arizona Cardinals, against the Washington Commanders, not counting your bye week, and the Houston Texans, your rushing average has jumped up to 134.7 yards per game. That is huge. For the most part, during that time, you've also seen big leads be taken early, and that's allowed this rushing attack to be used more often than not. The other thing that you're seeing in this is Robbie Oots coming back at that fullback position. You're able to utilize him in that fullback role, getting to linebackers, getting to even defensive ends at times, outside linebackers, and he's opening up holes for this rushing attack. The other thing that's important to note, That is an average. 134.7 yards per rush. That's good enough for top 10 in the NFL over that time span. And you're seeing a lot of the other teams that are in that top end. They're some of the better teams in the NFL right now. I don't think it's a shocker that your Seahawks essentially have not lost in over a month. Now, I don't think you're going to split and move to, hey, it's Kenneth Walker's team or it's Zach Charbonnet's team. I think you're going to continue to see both running backs be utilized to the best of their abilities. Right now, between the 20s, you're seeing Kenneth Walker be used the most. Why is that? Well, that's because he has the biggest explodability, big playability, I think is the way that I want to phrase it more often than not. Obviously, his long on the season is a 31-yard run, but I think it's most important to dive into his averages. 4.5 yards per carry. That's because when he does hit it big, he explodes, and he's got the breakaway speed to really run away from some of the better defenders in the National Football League. Now, he didn't have a lot of big runs against the Arizona Cardinals, but he did have two where it just felt like Kenneth Walker got through, found where the hole was, and bounced it all the way back. In this long zone scheme system, there are going to be multiple times in games where you don't get a high rushing yard per average. You get tackled in the backfield because the defense makes a big play or the running back doesn't see the hole. But when the running back does see the hole, and Kenneth Walker is starting to do it at a more consistent clip, that's when you see those big 20 and even 30-yard runs for him. Now, Zach Charbonnet, on the other hand, had his average drastically jump up. Going into this week, his average was 2.9 yards per carry. After last week's output, he got all the way to 3.3 yards per carry. And now his average yards per carry is never going to be high because of the touchdown numbers. Now, he has 6 touchdowns, but that's because the Seahawks are handing the ball off to Charbonnet down low in the goal line. So he's going to have to get a lot of those 2, 3 hard yard runs where you're really earning everything that you get. But I do want to point out that he had multiple big runs in this game, including his long for the season and his long for the game, which was a nice 30-yard run, where Charbonnet did a little bit of Kenneth Walker where he saw the hole cut back all the way across the grain and made a big play. Now, he wasn't able to run away from everyone like Kenneth Walker might be able to, but I would say that Zach Charbonnet was very impressive and is continuing to impress me as he gets further and further along into the season. I'm going to get into the big reason why I think that this running game has improved. Yes, I think a little bit is because of Zach Charbonnet's output. Yes, it's a little bit because of Kenneth Walker's output. Shoot, I'd even say George Holani, by the way, congratulations on that touchdown, my good friend, is starting to show why he's improving and helping this run game improve. But I do think there's one key group, one key position group that is the key to success for the Seahawks. And I'm going to give that to you here in just a moment. But I do want to hear what you have to say. So make sure that you comment down below on why you think the run game is improving. I want to let you guys know about the sponsor of today's video, and that, of course, is our good friends over at Prize Picks. The hard-hitting football action is even better with Prize Picks. The weather might be changing, but the feeling of being right never gets old. So keep the season rolling on Prize Picks by getting $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. Prize Picks is simple to play. Just pick more or less on any 2 to 6 player stat projections. If your picks are right, you could cash in. Prize Picks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Prize Picks is the best way to win cash this football season. Which players are going off? Which ones are overhyped? Make your picks in less than 60 seconds. Turn your takes into cash all season long on Prize Picks. I have a little 3-pick power play for the weekend. JSN, more on his rush receiving TDs. Matthew Stafford, less on his passing yards. And Sam Darnold, chucking it all over the yard, more on his passing yards. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. So why do I think the run game is improving? It's not a drastic move. It's not something that has been changed. Frankly, actually, the position group that I think is helping it is a position group that, frankly, I was demanding that there be a change made at the trade deadline. I was asking for it. I wanted it to be done. And look, there's still some room for improvement, but I think this offensive line is playing pretty darn good football right now. And I think they're playing it from basically every position on the crew. Gray Zabel is getting better every single week. He's not allowing any pass pressures throughout the entire season. The offensive line is doing great in the pass pro, but they were doing that great right away. This running game, well, shoot, it took them a little bit to get going, especially over on the right side. It felt like Abe Lucas and Anthony Bradford just weren't quite in the right conversation. The chemistry just wasn't quite there like it was on the left side. Remember, the big runs against the Pittsburgh Steelers for Kenneth Walker. They were all runs to the left side getting to that edge. Charles Cross was able to do it, and Gray Zabel was able to get the reach on the defensive tackle. When you ran to the right side, either Jalen Sundell, just sometimes he got beat at that center position, mano-y-mano, but also there were some issues for Anthony Bradford as well. Now, if you've seen the video clip, and we all know what video clip I'm talking about if you've seen it, there's a lot of room for improvement for Bradford still. I mean, shoot, to have your head down like this and completely whiff on a block is embarrassing. Embarrassing. But you're seeing that this group is starting to gel. And for the most part, the big runs are now coming on both sides of the football. That is forcing teams to not be allowed to stack the box one way. You were starting to see teams put some of their better run stoppers on the left side because they knew if there was going to be a run, it was going to go that way. The offense is also doing a great job, and I think it's another reason why you're seeing some steady improvement, of keeping Sam Darnold under center with whoever is at running back. Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet, George Holani, Rashid Shaheed, by the way. That was a pretty cool play. When they're behind him, directly behind him, that leaves every play in the playbook open for you in the rushing game. And that doesn't allow defenses to cheat. So you're starting to see more even boxes and more opportunities for your Seattle Seahawks to take advantage of that box that the defense is giving to you. The run game has steadily improved. They're continuing to move forward, and you need them to move forward in this rushing attack. I don't need the best rushing group. I don't need the best rushing stats in the NFL. I need an attack that can be balanced, at least close to 60-40. And I think right now, for most of the year, you've seen the Seahawks force the rushing attack without getting a lot of the success. And because that offensive line is clicking, because that offensive line is starting to open up holes, you're now not being forced to run the football. You're getting to do it because you want to. Just remember, you won the last game against the Arizona Cardinals. Now, there were some defensive help, but you won that game with Sam Darnold throwing the ball 12 times. 12 frickin' times. You ran the ball at an extremely efficient rate, even when the Cardinals knew that you were going to do it. You ran it well, and frankly, I think that this rushing attack is finally getting fixed, or becoming more consistent might be the best term. Make sure that you follow me over on X. Sam Darnold, plus 800 in the MVP odds, according to a book out there. Look, it wasn't that long ago that he was like 33-1, 30-1. I forget what the exact number was. Darnold is continuing to jump up MVP odds. I think he's going to continue to move forward. The Seahawks team is really freaking good, and so is Sam Darnold. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel as well. As always, we appreciate you for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time.